Howdy again, I'm back and it's the next day and I got the vise back from the paint shop and it looks good. And the main reason it looks good is because you can't see any of the mars, the damage, because it's covered with masking tape. But it is what it is. So let's take a look here now. And some of you that are astute observers are saying, what's with these two holes? Those weren't there at the beginning of this video. Well, you're right. And what I did is stopped right in the middle of what I was doing there, and I did another video, and that'll be tips number 414, and I drilled and tapped these on the Bridgeport mill using the right angle drive to show how that is done. And this is for the stop, the work stop made by Edge Technology. So that you'll see that later on. But what I'm going to do now is to strip the masking and start to assemble it. But remember, I still have to make the soft jaws. Okay, let the assembly begin. I put a coat of paint on this crank as well. It looks a little better. I smoothed this out where all the hammer marks were, so at least it won't hurt my hand when I crank it. Again, this is such a long crank, I don't know there's much need to hammer on it. So, with my Eagle 66 here, we'll oil her up a little bit and start the assembly. Now the jaw needs to have the screw assembled in it first. You know, there's something I don't get, and I've seen this on a lot of products. There's an oiler right there to oil the nut, but I don't understand why, because you got full access to the screw at any given moment to oil it, so that just doesn't make sense to me. So, anyway, remember, that's a left-hander. And these gibs are all cleaned up as well. Everything was cleaned. Never assemble anything dry. You've got to have a little oil on it. Not enough to make a mess. Alright, now the sliding jaw goes on like that. Do you remember that there was excess play here at the beginning? Well, I've already fitted up another washer. I had that in stock. And it pretty much matches these washers that have the notch in them. That's original equipment. So this, and you can buy these at the hardware store. They're not just common washers, but this would be a true size in here, not a nominal size. So that's how much play there was. Whatever the thickness, that's about 1/16 of an inch thick. So it'll be about 60 thousandths. So I'll put that in place. Get some Earl. I'll paint any car for $39.95. Remember Earl Scheib? Might still be in business. This slide quite smoothly, but I believe I'll put the gibs on next. I finally found a good way to line up the holes. Remember, these 3 screws for the gibs have to come up through this access hole here. So I got it hanging over the bench, and if it doesn't fall in my lap, I'll be okay. And I'll just snug those, and I put a little bit of oil on the threads, of course. and cleaned up those cap screws nicely. I'll flip it around and do the other side before I tighten them. Make sure everything still slides smoothly. Now with everything oiled up real well, we're ready to assemble it, and there are two washers here with notches. They have to line up with a little pin down there. Then this goes on and a roll pin driven in. Feels good. Now I'm not sure if this oiler here will take oil or not. Yes, it did. And I will give this one on the side a shot to see if it works. There was no way to check it without taking the brass nut out, which I wasn't about to do. Yeah, that took oil. And I assume there's a hole drilled there and it meets the nut at some point. And very little play here, but what play there is, of course, is in either the screw or the nut or both, and we don't care. Now to attack the final problem, which is the jaws. They're going to be soft jaws. I'm back again, and it's the next day. I'm ready to start making the soft jaws. Now notice that whoever had this before me used it without any jaws, and the vise will not close any more than that without jaws in there. So there are several considerations here. First of all, the fixed jaw, that is the soft jaw that's against this fixed part of the vise, has to have a chamfer on the bottom. And then there'll be two aluminum soft jaws cut from this stock, and this is a little bit wider than 6 inches. One on each side. As you can see, when this vise was manufactured, they did not square up this corner here. In fact, when I push a 1, 2, 3 block in here, that's as close as it will get, and that's approximately 1/8 of an inch. So there'll be a chamfer on there, 1/8 of an inch, just on the bottom part. So over to the saw I go, and I've already got these laid out about 2 1/4 inches. I think now you can see the layout lines a little better, and the space between the railroad tracks here is the waste stock. This is the setup where I'm going to put the 45-degree chamfer on the fixed jaw. This is aluminum now, and I'm using that 90-degree cutter. It's solid carbide. There is a layout line there, 1/8 of an inch in. You probably cannot see it on your screen, but I am following a layout line. And that's all there is to that operation. Alright, have a look here. Got that nice 45-degree bevel. And notice that there are two transfer punches already in place. Just so happened I had two of them. So the bevel will fit right here. Now these are oversized. These jaws are wider and higher than they need to be. So and it's all going to be milled so that they are even when both of them are screwed into place. So I will get them even this way, and not them, it clamped in place. Like that. No, I'm going to need both of them in there. Alright, that's more like it. Tighten down. Transferred. I'll open it up and they're ready to drill and tap. In the one jaw only. I will have to do the same thing to the movable jaw in a minute. There's the two center punch marks, and they will be drilled 5/16 and tapped 3/8 because the two cap screws are 3/8. I had to provide those. They were not with this, and I may have to cut them off. They go in from this end. Both holes are tapped, and I'll tighten them up. And as predicted, the screws are just a little bit longer than what I need, so I will grind off about one thread. There's no good way to use a washer. The washer would have to be, oh boy, very thin. So I'm better off just grinding a little bit off, and then we'll deal with the other jaw. I ground off the end of those cap screws so they're flush, and now I'll deal with this other jaw. See, this is already flat on the bottom side. This is rough sawn. Even it up with that. Tighten up the jaw, and then I'm ready to transfer the hole. The two holes in here, these two holes, are counterbored, and to the depth of where that black line is, these are 3/8 again. So in other words, those bolts go in that deep. They'll also have to be ground off just a little bit, a thread or so. I had those in stock, 3/8. So next thing I'm going to do, I already have two transfer punches, you know I love my transfer punches, installed in here. You can't see them because they're in that deep. So what I'm going to do now that I have the jaw tightened is just take a punch and probably out of range here, I'm going to strike the punches with the punch. So it's a double punch. So they're spotted. Let's take a look at them. And there they are. There's just no better way to locate holes, as far as I'm concerned, than transferring them. You can lay them out, but you know, then I'd have to determine what the dimensions are. So I'm ready to drill and tap those. Again, 3/8. I'll see you in a moment. This may not be worth mentioning, but I am doing my drilling and tapping on the drill press so that the holes will be straight. So I drilled the hole and I'm tapping it in the same setup where I clamped the work down, and that is a spring-loaded tap follower and a tapered hand tap with a Greenfield tap wrench. Is that enough detail? It's cold down here. I have to wear long sleeves. By cold, I mean 68 degrees. Now I know that hole will be perfectly straight. I'll do the other one the same. Alright, this jaw is mounted, I think, permanently now. These bolts were cut off, ground off, by about 1 thread or so, so I'm done on that side. Now before I close the jaws and mill them off so that they're even, I'm going to do one more thing. You know, I have long enjoyed this type of vise where it has 2 V-grooves. So I'm going to do the same. I'm going to put a vertical V-groove pretty much right in the center, and then the horizontal one as well. So what I've already done off camera is to locate the exact center between the 2 bolts and marked it with a Sharpie, and then I took my square and I raised it up all the way. And then as far as the horizontal, that's totally arbitrary and capricious, but I used 1 1/4" parallel and just struck a line with the Sharpie. Now I'll take this jaw off and go over to the Bridgeport and using the other Bridgeport vise, make those V-grooves. At the Bridgeport, I've mounted in the spindle, in the collet, that 90-degree carbide cutter from KBC. I think maybe I mentioned that before. But you know, I'm filming this over a several-day period, so thank you for sticking with me if you're still there. Of course, if you aren't there, I won't be talking to you. So I had to do 2 things. First of all, I had to take a light cut off the rough sawn side of this so that I could hold it in a vise. So I took off the minimum amount. Now I've located the table just by eye on that layout line, so it's not all that critical really. And how deep am I going to go? Just deep enough so I do not hit the vise jaws, the hardened vise jaws. Well, I'm talking about 2 sets of jaws. Aluminum soft jaws and the original hardened jaws. So let's give it a try, see what happens. Well, this is the last pass. That's about as deep as I can go without striking the hardened vise jaws. The depth that I cut it to leaves the V-groove just a little over 1/4 inch, so that's ample. And I changed my mind here. You know, I had a layout line for this other V-groove going in the long direction. I thought maybe that's not quite close enough to the top of the vise, so I moved it about 1/8 of an inch this way. So now I'm ready to cut this groove. That's what I like about working without a blueprint. I can change the dimension at any given moment. And I often do. Amazing, Grace. Well, there it is. And I hope these soft jaws aren't too soft. So the final step here, and I'm just about done. I'll put this back in place, and then I'm going to take the entire 6-inch vise over to the Bridgeport and mount it on the Bridgeport and do the final milling. And I believe I'll also put the keys on before I do that. So I'll see you at the Bridgeport in 7 minutes. Holy mackerel, is that vise heavy. Now I know why I switched to a 5-incher. The last time I hoisted a 6-inch vise I was strong and virile. Now I'm weak and emaciated. Well, the whole idea here now is with this 3/4 wide carbide cutter here, I'm just going to take these jaws down even and smooth. Again, no particular dimension. There's about a 1/4 inch sticking up right now, so yeah, I'll take off perhaps 1/8 of an inch or less. Here we go. The top is done, and there is about 3/16 sticking up, and that leaves me a little bit if I ever need to dress it down again, if it gets damaged. So now I installed one of my longer cutters. It has to have at least 2 inches of flute, and this one has about 2.5. So I'm going to mill off the ends of the aluminum jaws, both, well, I should say on this end and the other end, so that there's approximately 3/32 or so sticking out beyond the iron movable jaw. Let's see how that goes. I don't know how sharp this is. I never have used it. You know what, this cutter is horribly dull, and perhaps you could hear the chatter. Totally unacceptable. I could take it out and belt sand it, but you know, that's not right. So looking through my selection of cutters, I did find this Niagara cutter that was given to me 2 years ago or less. It's a 5/8 and it's solid carbide, and it's 5 flutes, and I bet anything that it's up to the task. So let me put that in. Boy, is that carbide heavy. Solid carbide. That's a lot better. Still not perfect, and I know it's always problematic when you have a real long and relatively slender cutter. I could have played around with different spindle speeds and so on, but the job is done on this end, and I'm going to go around the other end and do the same. I'm just about done now, other than knocking off the burrs, both inside and out, breaking those corners a little bit so I don't skin my knuckles and so on, all the way around. That takes just 2 or 3 minutes. I thought I'd take a couple readings here with the dial indicator, actually a test indicator. So what I'm doing here is just going to sweep this aluminum jaw and see how far off it is. And in a way, this is just really a test of how accurate the keys are that I installed, and how accurately, I guess, I restored the key slots earlier in the video. So let me run this across and see what we got. Got to be careful I don't break the point off when I hit that V notch. Well, we got parallax error here. Remember, those are 1/2 thousandths divisions. So let me stand in front of it. Oh, it's less than 1/1000th difference from end to end. So boy, that's, to me, that's spot on. Now with the indicator set up as you see it, zero it out with the knee crank, and I'll just run it across. Now there's a lot of imperfections here, so the needle's going to bobble around. Oh my. Pretty much right on. That kind of surprises me. And now for the grand finale, and the reason why these traditional vices have fallen into disfavor. This is a 1-2-3 block installed in the vise, and it's just snug now. And looking at the indicator, as I tighten the vise, And notice the indicator point is way toward the fixed jaw. And as I tighten it, you see a little bit of movement, perhaps a thousandth or less. Now I'll loosen it again. It's just snug. And move this really what amounts to 1 inch. Now watch the indicator needle. Moved a little more. Now let's try one more position. Now with the tip of the indicator way out on the edge and the 1, 2, 3 block is repositioned. Let me zero that just a little bit. So I'm 2 inches out now. I'm raising the knee there. Now I'm going to tighten the vise. It's almost on zero, but watch what happens as I snug up the vise. It moved 4,000. So the work is tipping up as I tighten the vise. This is typical of this type of vise, especially older ones, and the Kurt angle lock type of vices will not do that. One more position yet. Now the tip of the indicator is 3 inches out from the fixed jaw, and the vise is just barely snugged up, but so watch the needle now as I tighten it. And it also moved about 3 thousandths, not much difference from the 2-inch position. So that's just to illustrate the faults with this type of vise and how the entire movable part here really is tipping one way or the other. And you won't get that with an angle lock vise. I thought you might find that interesting. Well, that completes the restoration or repair or cosmetic facelift, painting, whatever you want to call this 2-part video. It was rather long. Thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you in my next video. This is tubalcain saying so long for now.